So Jared's here today because we are going to be talking about underrated. Excuse me. See, Riley messed me up. Overrated Marvel movies. Yeah, thank you. There's been so many movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and this is just the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not old Marvel movies. Not X-Men movies, just the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes.
So there have been so many movies that have come out, and there are movies
How
that I'm
many
sure.
are we on?
This is
How many do we think we got?
11, 12.
21, I think.
21.
Yeah.
Wow. So
21?
21 movies.
21 in 10 years.
2010
Just like my
years.
age.
10 years. So
That's pretty damn
that makes
good.
sense. All right, let's get into it. What happened? What'd you do? What'd you do?
It's for the guys. I made a joke, nobody laughed, so I myself because they say I laugh at myself all the time.
Well, because this all stemmed, Jared, from last week's conversation. we were getting into I don't even know how it came up, but Doctor Strange came up, and Roxy hates Doctor Strange, and thinks that it's overrated and doesn't like it at all. And I was like, you know what? Let's get into a overrated Marvel Cinematic Universe conversation. And Riley, have you seen? So, what are some of the comments that the audience is saying, and maybe we can start with one of those.
Yeah, this is a big one for me. Top 5 most overrated.
Yeah.
Number 1, Civil War. Number 2, Guardians, the first one.
Wow, I can't
Number
stand this
3,
person.
Infinity War. Number 4, Doctor Strange. And number 5, Avengers. Underrated, Incredible Hulk.
I agree with that.
That's a
that was my
list
number one.
that I'm shocked at.
Yeah, I love
that,
Incredible
they consider it.
Civil War number 1?
Yeah,
Civil War to
War's
me.
the
Infinity
best.
War in there.
I-
Guardians number 1. I
No,
mean,
all
to each
those
their
movies,
own.
all those movies that I disagree with that person completely.
Yeah.
I loved.
I
Actually,
do too, but it's a good conversation.
It's a great
you know?
conversation. There's none of those that I feel are overrated. I feel that Civil War is in the top 5 for sure, of the best ones. I think the Infinity War is one of the best ones. I agree with him on an underrated. I love the Incredible Hulk, but
Same.
but
I do too.
Jared, let's start with you. Give me your first overrated pick and why.
Well, to be fair, full disclosure, I thought we were coming in doing underrated movies because I was going to do
that's
The
my
Incredible Hulk, or I was actually going to either argue our Ultron because I feel like that's an underrated movie. Nobody talks about that. Overrated? I'd say it's hard because it hasn't really aged yet, but I got to go Infinity War. I really like Infinity War. I didn't love Infinity War.
How many times have you seen it?
3.
That's enough.
Yeah.
But I think as time goes on, like my opinion changes about movies. I get it that this is more like Infinity War is more part of like a long television show. Like I get it. It's 10 years of Marvel. There's 21, 22 films, but it just as a movie on its own, I was like, yeah, it was really good. I didn't love it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of over the top CGI, which is fine. It's a Marvel movie. I get it. But there wasn't really that much character development, and I get it. We've already had these people, but it was just like jumping from scene to scene to scene and character and character to character. And like the first 45 minutes, it was like, okay, here's Strange, here's Iron Man, and then Captain America, and here's the little storyline between Scarlet Witch and Vision, and like it's just like all these little storylines that was just very overwhelming. By the time it got to the end, I was like, okay,
You're done.
Whew, here we go. Yeah, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now.
I think that you explained why well, but it's funny. It actually sits as number 1 for me on all.
Number 1 overrated?
No, number
just
one
number
in
1.
general. It's my Civil War, not Civil War. Winter Soldier was my favorite for a very long time, and after my 3rd viewing of Infinity War is when I said this is. I think because of what it's starting and what it's setting up and what it has and the stakes, and it also because of showing me how important all these movies were and how invested I was all the way through. That this was the end. I like when movies have an end game. Or when things have an end game, when franchises have an end game, and this was the end game. This was always set up that it was going there and watching this happen and how this impossible task of getting all these mega movie stars and all these mega characters into one movie and making us care about all their little side stories and making us care about where they were going, and they pulled that off. And the music, Alan Silvestri's score, I love this movie, but I gotta understand that because you're not saying you dislike it. And what I'll do is the movie that I dislike, I think everybody knows that I think is completely overrated is Guardians Volume 2. It's
Same.
It's
Totally with you.
completely overrated, but
Most underrated movie in the franchise.
oh, I can't
agree.
say. I think it's overrated.
Why do you think it's underrated?
Because it's great. And
Because it's great.
Because it's
Duh.
great. That's it.
and that's
Good
why
point. Let's move on.
I think because of Guardians 1, people were like, but it did the same thing. But it made me laugh just as hard, and it did it just as well. So why is it not getting the credit?
Oh,
it deserves?
I don't think it did. I think it was a
Yeah.
completely different movie than the first one. I think the first movie had a lot of humor, but they still it was you knew which characters were telling the jokes and that they were able to kind of maneuver. And they all had James Gunn's humor all over that first movie, but it was still to me not just a joke fest because literally every single person in that movie tells jokes, and it's like there's not one serious person. There's not. It's and don't get me Mantz. Because like even she's still there to be funny. Everyone's Drax they completely killed.
I didn't call it realistic.
No, but I'm not realistic. Drax in the first movie was funny because of how naive he was, right? And also but he had this serious mission of really trying to find out what the hell happened to his family, or wanted to have revenge for his family. And he had this mission, and it was like there was this sadness to him, but it was him being naive. There was in Infinity War and in this movie, it's just like he's just there to be Rodney Dangerfield.
I agree. I felt like Volume 2, like the first Guardians, there were actual characters, and I felt Volume 2, they were almost caricatures of themselves.
Yes.
Where it was like, oh, Raccoon has to be funny. Like, so everything he says has to be funny. And Drax is like
And it was.
a big dumb idiot. And it did, like, a lot of the humor landed, but for me, there wasn't enough. It just felt like a lot of fluff.
That's a good point because again, and I have to say this though too. No, it's a good point.
You just made it.
No, his point with the jokes that actually hit, that I laughed throughout that movie. That's the thing. The jokes were funny.
Yeah.
It just didn't fit. And that's why I think it's like people like Perry, I go back and forth. She loves the movie. I just think it's completely overrated. But the one I was going to go with, off of his point of a movie that he likes, like Infinity War, they just think it's overrated, and I know there's gonna be gasps in the air. Let me explain before I finish it.
Oh shit!
I think that the first Iron Man is a bit overrated.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I know. and I'll
Shots fired.
It's a great movie. It's a great movie, but it's a bit overrated how great it is because the ending is ridiculous.
Yeah, that last act is poo.
The ending is ridiculous in the fact that Jebediah, like the whole, what's the premise of the
Obadiah.
movie? Well, Obadiah, what are you, Jebediah? the whole premise of the movie, the whole story is Tony Stark throughout this whole movie is trying to figure out how to perfect this suit. He's got it. Even that one, even Ralphie from Christmas Story, inside of it says, I'm not Tony Stark. I don't know how to do this. And he finally does it. And at the end, Obadiah just jumps into the damn suit, figures it out, makes it within seconds. And why didn't he do that in the first place? Why didn't he need Tony Stark? It was like this. It was a silly ending to a great movie. But the movie's really good. I just think it's a little overrated how perfect people think it is because it's not The Dark Knight. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the ending of Iron Man with that fight between Obadiah and Tony Stark is a little underwhelming, but then the movie makes up for it for the last scene where he's like, I am Iron Man. And then it ends and they're like, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Everything is forgiven.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe why people have like a different image of it, but I think you're right.
Yeah, Riley?
About Iron Man?
No, in general.
In general, I mean, I'm with you on Guardians 2. I would say the most overrated for me recently was Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I felt a little bit like you did with Guardians Volume 2. A lot of jokes, and it was taking me out. I felt like there was we talked about it in the spoiler review, a shift in the rules. Like all of a sudden they're shrinking the van, and when they could, and then they shrink with it. Like I was a little confused. And then the best part of it was the tag at the end for me, but I didn't connect with it as much as I wanted to because I loved the first Ant-Man and felt they went away from that movie and that humor. The humor was a little too much on the second.
So go ahead, Roxy. Go ahead and attack Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange.
Okay, here's the thing about Doctor Strange. When I first saw it, I didn't walk out saying, I hate that movie. I walked out thinking, I didn't really like that.
Underwhelmed?
Yeah. And then everybody loved it so much that it just started to piss me off. Because it was like, if you didn't love it, you were stupid. And I'm not all the time. And I didn't.
So brave.
And I am so brave. And I didn't think that it was good because it was just a bunch of like hoodoo guru boo you shubu.
Whoa. That is a Beardo. You know what to do.
That's really what it was, though. And he's
What?
like,
He says perfect.
it just
Get
was.
the sound.
And he's so.
No, he said he was on it.
Oh.
He's so pompous and arrogant, and I get that that's the character, but I just didn't like him at all. Like, I didn't like him at all. And if I'm not going to like a character, I want you to be like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where I hate you, so I love you.
Right.
He just was annoying. And so when he ends up showing up, I couldn't stand that he's now part of our universe because he's like, I've got it. Yoga. And it's like, no, you don't have it. are so obnoxious.
You see, I didn't like the movie. That's not fair. When I saw it the first time, I felt like you did, to where I said it was okay, and I saw it a second time when I watched it because my wife hadn't seen it in the theater, so we watched it, and I wound up liking it a lot the second time because
Doctor Strange.
Yeah, because I do like, and it wasn't because I didn't like him. Because I did like him. Him and Tony Stark are very similar in ways, and their stories are very similar in ways.
Tony is so much more lovable, though.
Yes, and that's also there's a different type of arrogant, rich dude who's relying on a lot of things. There's just two different versions of it, and this is Tony Stark, aka Robert Downey Jr., has that quality about him that you just want to love the dude, as where Cumberbatch can be a dick.
Yeah,
and that's kind of the point. They're both dicks, but it just one's a little bit more lovable.
Yeah.
But Riley, are you on Roxy's side here?
I'm a little bit on Roxy's side because I watched it. My fiance, her favorite is Doctor Strange. Because she brings in, and a lot of people brought up on the chat, she loves some of the spiritual stuff. She likens it to yoga and her studies, and she really got into it. So we watched it again. I've seen it probably 3 times, and both times I was like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
It just doesn't do it for me that much.
I guess I didn't realize Doctor Strange was so beloved.
Yeah, he's really
is, huh?
beloved.
Yeah.
Now that
And
you bring it up.
a lot of people are saying this, and I agree with this. He was better for me in Infinity War. I loved him
totally,
in
way
Infinity
better.
War.
Did you like him better?
It was better, but I already hate his face so much that when it showed up, I was
You knew who he
bitter.
was.
Yeah.
He had already pissed you off before.
If I had never seen Doctor Strange and he just showed up, I obviously would have been confused, but I would have been like, oh, okay.
Right.
So I couldn't separate the two.
Okay.
Which was frustrating.
That's
What
fair.
else? What
I
else
mean,
you
that's
got?
the point of the whole MCU, right?
Right.
You're not supposed to separate the two.
Yeah.
Like, it leads into the next.
I'd like to get a temperature in the room here because
Sure.
a lot of people in the chat room are saying, "Go ahead,
76.8.
say it.
Yes.
Black Panther is overrated."
I don't.
And I don't buy.
Yeah.
I can't say that because I just
bit.
watched it Saturday
Yeah,
night.
I mean they're looking to start some shit.
They
and
wanna
that's,
start
and,
some
that-
shit,
and that's fine. But I will say that I don't think it's overrated because I think Ryan Coogler, because to me the story's Ryan Coogler, and what he wanted to do with that movie and how important he knew the movie would be. But it was also watching him transition as a filmmaker. You could see him go from Fruitvale Station to Creed to this, and you could see the evolution of a filmmaker from independent film to a bigger budget to a huge budget, and he did it seamlessly.
Yes.
Kristen, you know what Brett would be saying to you right now?
What's that?
We can't
We can't talk about
about
this from. We can't talk about this from. Yeah, we're not
We
allowed
gotta
to
cut
talk
it.
about
We
it.
gotta
Yeah,
cut
yeah,
that
sure. But that's probably why they wanted to talk about it
Yeah.
because Brett's not here. We should have gotten
I'm
that
sorry.
summit.
I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
That scene, it's like James Bond. She
Yeah.
goes to Shuri. He gets his devices. They go to Korea. It's like it is straight up James Bond,
Right.
and I love that scene. And then Okoye just wrecking shit.
Yeah.
She just pulls the wig off, goes crazy. That movie I
cool
loved. I
movie.
saw it again for probably the 4th time now, and I loved
the
every
music
minute.
is fantastic.
The music
score
is
and the original
phenomenal.
The music
soundtrack.
is
Yeah.
When Andy Serkis is like, what is it, a funeral in here? Let's play some music. And then all of a sudden they start playing the music during the car chase.
Yeah.
I was like,
So
okay,
great.
this is why I came here. This is amazing.
This is so good.
I love this movie. I really do. But what I will say is that anybody who puts this in their top 3 list, I do think is overrated.
I agree.
Yeah, I would put it in my top 3. I think. Yeah.
and it's in a lot of people's top 3.
Yeah,
And
which is fair.
I
I'd
think
say it's in my
that
top 10.
But here's
then
a-
it
here's a
would be
different- yeah.
overrated. But if it's in your top 5, top 7, I get it.
It also depends on who, because again, I think when I took RB3 with me to the premiere, right? Thank you, RB3, and this again, when you think about growing up, and for RB3, there's no black superheroes, right? So
There's not a lot. There were not.
There were not Blade,
Barely any,
barely
yeah.
any. So when this and to put it in and even Blade, smaller budget, it just happened to pop. This movie meant so much to so many people. So you can understand to where there were a lot of people that would have it in their top for
Of
what
course.
for what it meant to them. In general, to me, I think it's a really well done movie. I think that the movie to me is probably in top 10. I'd put it in the top 10. I would not put it in my top 5. But again, you talk about people who really popped in Infinity War. I cared so much about Wakanda.
Yeah.
Like it was, and then to see all that stuff go down with them. Yeah, I think it was a great movie. Yeah.
So wait, is it top 3 highest box office? Black Panther?
yeah.
Because it's behind
I think it's
Avengers
top
Infinity
rated.
War, right?
I think
And then
so,
that's
yeah.
3?
Yeah, I think so.
So if you go by that logic, it might be overrated. If it's the 3rd highest grossing film in the MCU,
Just as a movie, but I get what
I don't
Christian's
know.
saying.
It's interesting. I agree with both you guys because it is just where you put the movie.
No, because you're going to do the same thing though too, because you're looking at that money again. The amount of people that came out to see that movie, that's not just comic book movie fans. Those are families going, oh, wait a minute. We have representation here.
I agree.
We have someone who looks like us that is part of this, and that's why that money made the money that it did. So that movie made the money that it did, and that's why I don't think it's overrated at all.
Hopping out of the MCU for a second, what is that? What are those numbers compared to Wonder Woman? Because different reasons, same situation where I don't think it's just comic book fans coming out to see a film.
100%.
I totally agree, but I think people a lot of times equate box office numbers with listing on a listing a movie in your top 5.
Wonder Woman did 821.
821.
It's big.
That's
Real big. Yeah, for sure. All right, Riley. Well, actually, what about the boys in the booth?
Oh, I got a hot take.
Well, of course you do.
I believe the first Avengers is very overrated.
Ooh.
Yes.
Wow.
It's pretty dated. The jokes don't land as hard. The writing is a little, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think the writing works as much. And it looks like a TV movie. I think at the time, because we haven't been so oversaturated by seeing so many heroes in one movie,
Right.
It was fun to see all that. And I think it's still a good movie, but I think it's just a tad bit overrated.
I think that I don't think that take is that crazy. I think because what was the big appeal of the first Avengers was exactly what Copster just said, and that's to see all the heroes together. And now we're kind of immune to it at this point, but it's like, I just think for what it did for its time, it was like 2012.
2012,
Yeah, it was a big monumental accomplishment. But I don't think that's a crazy take.
Question.
Okay.
A question for you, Cobster.
Yes, please. Ask me.
If Justice League had come out before Avengers did, do you feel like Justice League would be getting the same kind of recognition that the first Avengers gets?
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, that's tough because, one, they're two different movies, and, I mean...
That is true.
RB3 just walked in. Cool.
Nice.
We're having a party. RB3 just dropped in.
Awesome.
I don't know, because did we get the same... Would we have gotten the same results as what we got? So, like, the Justice League movie that came out, last year, this year? I don't know when it came out.
Last year, yeah.
It's that same movie. Like, there's no problems or anything. It's still that movie that we all saw, or was the movie different?
Still the same movie.
Same movie? I don't think so, because
Yeah.
Avengers is coherent. There wasn't. I mean, I'm sure there were studio reshoots and stuff like that.
Well, there's a build-up too.
There is the build-up
yeah.
of the universe itself. We got to care about those characters and see them. So no, I don't think it made that much of a difference.
And I also think that the Avengers suffers from a lot of the same thing that the Force Awakens suffers from, which is like people went into it with a certain expectation, anticipation, and it blew minds.
Right.
And then you go back and watch it, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe it's not as good as I originally thought, but that still doesn't take away from your first experience watching it. Because I can remember being in the theater watching the Avengers and just having a smile from ear to ear the entire time. And it was the same thing with the Force Awakens. And now people like go back and kind of shit on it a little bit.
Yeah.
They're like, no, I still think, yes, it came out, a few years ago, and maybe it is a little bit dated, maybe it doesn't age as well, but like it's still an awesome movie for me, and something that I can't really overrate for the simple fact of like every time I watch it, I still get giddy.
I think Copster made a good point as far as like why. Same thing like I said with Iron Man. Like it's like I acknowledge it's a good movie, but here are the reasons why, and I think he stated his case pretty well there too. What are they saying on Twitter, Riley?
Twitter, I've seen a lot of Spider-Man Homecoming
See, I would put that on underrated.
as overrated.
I'd put it on underrated.
Underrated.
I think it's exactly where it needs to be.
I agree,
so
Jared.
too.
I
It's
agree.
my favorite Spider-Man.
Me too.
I think they nailed it.
Yeah.
Absolutely nailed it. It's like amazing to see it go into the MCU and for them to get a handle on it so fast. Like
Better than Raimi's Spider-Man 2?
Yeah.
I
'Cause that was my
love
favorite.
It's neck and neck.
Yeah.
I would give the slight edge to Homecoming. But
I always get shit for this. I think Spider-Man 2 is very dated now.
Really?
I haven't seen it in a while.
Actually, yeah,
It's
that's
very,
fair.
It's very
I bet
dated.
it is.
It's very dated.
But I
Doc
still,
Ock? The
What?
special effects. There are moments in that movie where you're like, oh god. Even back in 2003, 4 when it came out.
Bring up.
Oh, what's that?
Bring
Sorry.
up Bonnie
I
Somerville.
gave RB3 my headphones. What was the question?
Bring up Bonnie Somerville Spider-Man 2.
Oh, yes. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever seen this? Yeah.
My dong take is that I love Amazing Spider-Man too, so I can't even be part of
Whoa.
the
I
Spider-Man
love
conversation.
the.
Yeah.
Do you like the first Amazing Spider-Man?
Yeah.
I love the first Amazing
Yeah.
Spider-Man.
First one's
I don't
good.
care what anybody says.
Yeah, I like the first one.
But they shit on
First
both
one's
because
fine.
I like
Oh,
the second
I
one.
The
love
first
it,
one's
man.
fine. The
That-
second one's
Such a good
There you
job.
go.
That-
There you go.
that
So this
James
is-
Horner
So
score.
friend of the show, Bonnie Somerville.
The score's great.
Here you go. This is Bonnie's moment in Spider-Man 2.
Remember.
It's so silly. It's like why is it even?
This is classic Raimi right
That
there.
is classic.
Yeah, but it's like
Randy right there.
it was unnecessary. Look good for Bonnie, but it's such an unnecessary thing.
He
that
does
the
that
only
all
thing
the
she does
time.
in the whole
That's
movie?
that's
Yeah,
just
she
pure
already
Raimi.
had friends and everything too. Like it was, but she took Spider-Man too. It was,
Dude,
it was
he
cool.
does that all the time in all three Spider-Mans. Like, even in the original, when they're at the Macy's Day Parade, and then some girl's like, hey, look, Spider-Man! And
Yeah.
it's like a close-up of her.
Yeah.
It's the cheesiest thing I've ever
It's a
seen.
lot of cheese in that. movie.
Evil Dead is the scene
yes.
putting on Doc Ock. That is Evil
Yeah,
Dead.
yeah.
The version of the like
Totally.
things,
Yeah.
the chainsaw. It makes a chainsaw reference. So great.
What about RB3? RB3. So who?
Timing. Yeah.
RB3. So what do you? What's an overrated Marvel movie that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I don't know if you guys talked about it because I just got here.
Okay.
You guys are talking shit about Black Panther. Which one of y'all? Which one? of
No,
y'all?
no, we're not.
Okay, so my most overrated is easily Iron Man 3. Easily Iron Man 3. I think that's the worst.
Is it overrated?
It's
though?
not, yeah.
Is it even rated?
I mean,
I think it
guess
falls
a
in
lot
the
of-
underrated, maybe.
There's a lot of people. I don't know about underrated. It made $1 billion. It made $1 billion. It made $1 billion. It's one of the highest rated. You know, people say it's the most different Marvel film. No, I think it's like a really shitty, like kind of like overall movie. You know, so
And it has a gain. It has gained like a cult following a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. Well, the thing I would disagree that it's not a good movie. And Copster hates my take on it, but I think it's a shitty MCU movie. I think it's a good movie though. I think it's a much better, like the Shane Black humor really is put together very well, way better than that shitbox Predator.
Wow.
Like there's the comedy is like you could tell there's like a really solid script there. It's just the choices made were to some people. The Ben Kingsley thing still pisses people off.
Oh, it's so bad.
Yeah.
And then, but there is some really good action set pieces, like that
Yeah.
Malibu house explosion.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then even
And the
the plane
music.
sequence.
And the music.
But it's interesting, like you said, there's just like things that they decide to do. Like the plane sequence is awesome, but then immediately afterwards you find out he wasn't in the suit, and you're like,
That bummed me out.
Yeah, it bummed me out. I was like, oh,
Yes.
that takes away from the scene a little bit.
Yeah, and they even retconned it pretty much too. They retconned a lot of stuff. It looked like that's the direction he was going to go in, and they took the thing out of him. But now they retconned all that shit anyway. They didn't even pay attention to that movie.
it feels like they honestly were trying to make an Iron Man parody with Iron Man 3 to a certain extent. And I feel like the first. I feel like I'm most disappointed because up until the Malibu sequence, it was one of the best Marvel movies, period. And then it just completely undid itself.
I agree with that, and I think that it's very similar to I don't want to open up a big fart in the room here,
Oh,
but
God, no.
it reminds me of Last Jedi. Sorry, it reminds me of
Whatevs.
the same type
Love
of.
it.
No, but it just reminds me of the same type of conversation is where you have a director who took all the stuff that was set up in previous iterations of where the franchise was going to go and the expectations of kind of what the rules that we've set so far, and then go, no, sorry fans, we're not going to do any of that shit. That's this. Look at the Mandarin, who he really is. There's Luke, and you're like, oh, no,
Still love it.
I'm all right.
I thought it was
Yeah.
amazing.
But I
I'm just
get
saying
it.
the
I get that.
comparisons are
I can
Jedi?
see the
Yeah.
comparisons.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's definitely comparisons.
It definitely
Love
it'll
it.
land on you
Best
differently,
Star Wars
obviously.
movie. He's got left hanging a long
Yeah, for a
time.
really long
Oh,
time.
sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks, man.
You deserve it.
Wait, love what?
It wasn't even really
We'll
good.
do another one.
Oh, The Last
She
Jedi?
loves Last Jedi.
I love Last Jedi.
I love
Great.
Last
I love
Jedi.
Last
Movie.
Jedi.
The more I watch it,
I don't want to like
It's going to
dive.
open up a can of worms.
It's opening a can of
Last
worms,
Jedi,
exactly.
And the chat turn. No.
Yeah. No. Well, do we have any other movies that we missed from the booth, or Alex? Did you go home?
Alex, you got an overrated one?
We covered them all.
Overrated. Hold on, can I get that?
Lilo and Stitch.
Ohana
Yeah, what else is on?
Bannerlord.
Where'd you go? What else are they
Bannerlord.
saying in the chat room?
I'm looking.
You know what's an underrated movie is
Some people are
Captain
going to
America:
Logan.
First Adventures.
Oh, overrated. Come on. Now.
Logan's not in the Marvel Cinematic.
That's yeah. We're staying away from that.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my God, if
I've
we were
seen Iron
opening
Man
up-
3. Thor Ragnarok. I've seen a lot of Thor Ragnarok
that's
is overrated.
overrated.
Which
Interesting.
Thor Ragnarok is creeping
Yeah.
its way into my top 5.
I love Ragnarok.
love
See,
Ragnarok.
and the people
Me
always
too.
throw it to me, how do you like Ragnarok but hate Guardians too?
Right. I know.
Because from my same point I made before, is that when the humor fit the scene and it fit the character and it set up where it was going. So I loved Ragnarok. I thought
Ragnarok's one of my favorites
And it
now.
breathed some new life into Thor that was dying after
Exactly.
Dark World.
It's
Yeah.
exactly what the MCU needed. It needed a change of tone. It needed something different. It needed something a little bit lighter. They needed to take Thor in a different direction, and the movie came out exactly where it needed to be.
Yeah.
And they continued it into Avengers, where Thor was still a comedic character, but with a very don't double cross him.
Yeah.
Question
Thor-
though.
Yeah, who's that?
That's Copster. Hi, how you doing?
How are you?
Copster.
Isn't that
Hello.
isn't that the same thing as Iron Man 3 though? Isn't Thor Ragnarok pretty much just making fun of Thor the entire time?
It's just a better movie.
I don't see. I don't think so though. No,
Yeah.
I think it is because the way he started off, he's very serious and he's got his fish out of water jokes, but they made him a cartoon character in Thor Ragnarok, which I love, and they continue. I think that's perfect.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think
Yeah.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
I just seeing him. I mean, you saw true human emotion from Thor,
Yeah.
like losing. I know losing Hammer, but
Yeah.
it was a moment for him.
It
I
was.
loved it. I felt the humor worked.
The stuff with his dad and his sister. Yeah, I didn't find him a cartoon character at all. I actually
No.
found
Yeah.
him the most
and
relatable.
then, yeah,
of all
to your
the three.
point, Jared, carrying over into Infinity War, the best parts for me at least were Thor, Rocket, and Groot.
Yeah.
I want
Totally.
as Guardians of the Galaxy as
He
the
was-
next
And
movie.
Quill.
Yeah.
I love that dynamic where
It-
Quill
it
felt
was
threatened
so,
by him.
It was so great.
Yeah, and I think that was the whole point. The reason why you cared the most about Thor and Infinity War is the stuff they set up in Ragnarok.
Totally.
With the conversations that he had about.
And to argue that point between Iron Man 3 and Thor Ragnarok, I just think that in Iron Man 3, there wasn't really that much payoff for Tony Stark. Like at the end, it was really Pepper Potts that killed whatever,
right.
Mandarin, Killian, whatever. And then at the end, no, like Thor, there's an arc there and he comes and then he finds the lightning within himself and he
Yeah.
ends up saving the day. Like at the end of Iron Man 3, it was making fun of Tony Stark, but there was really never a payoff. Like he didn't really do anything at the end. It was all the suits and it was cool, but he didn't do anything.
Right.
I think
and
he-
then at the end for Thor, it's just a little bit more payoff for me.
I think they're both great, but it's also about proximity to the big movie. Like we had just been with Thor, and we wanted to see more about where that was going,
Right.
and it wasn't that long. I mean, how much time was in between those two films?
Which one?
Between Thor Ragnarok and Infinity War.
It was
a matter of
6-7
months.
months.
Right.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we were invested because
Right.
people were just seeing Thor.
As
and then
part of the
they're going-
television show. Yeah, it's true. And the only thing that I don't like about Thor Ragnarok is that how successful it was. That I think it's going to hurt Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
Meaning that people are going to see that. And we should do it like Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
That's not a legitimate complaint to have.
No, not really, but it is in regards to how they're gonna, because everybody, well, it worked for Guardians too, and it worked for Thor Ragnarok. It does not work for Masters of the Universe.
No,
at
totally
all.
agree. Totally
Get
agree.
away from that shit.
Yeah.
Don't do it that way.
Hey guys, this is RB3 here. I
Hi,
have a
RB3.
quick question.
How are you?
I'm good.
nice to see
I have
you.
a quick question. Has Infinity War been brought up in this conversation?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I brought
yeah.
it up.
All right, cool, because I think it's overrated.
All right, cool. Well,
All right, cool.
well, see you later.